Okay, so the reason why we're here is because a few weeks ago we asked a good friend of ours, Dr. Lee Novak, to do some video for us so that we could put it on YouTube discussing the issues. And we recently got an email from the elections committee that says that we're not allowed to do any videos in club property. It's very important that you make an informed decision when you go to vote because this is a critical election for SolIVita. So I decided to ask Jean Foster to come over to my home and have a discussion about where we both stand on the issues and answer some questions from a couple of residents that are here with us today. Thanks for coming over, Jean.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I've heard you had a big lanai here, and I'm surprised at the size of it. Well done. Looks great.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's great.
So I think since we're on the topic of transparency, which is what I'm referring to in this email that we received, the whole purpose of videotaping was so that residents know exactly where I stand on the issues. Because if they don't agree with me, I want them to be able to say it, and I want them to be informed about how they vote.
And that's a very fair comment. I think that people need information. Some of the information they get is accurate. Some of it's not so accurate, and some of it is simply opinions. But people are entitled to form their own views themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think I've talked a little bit to Lita about this, about the social media issue, and that's very confusing. I think that social media can be a very important tool for communication if it's used right. I suggested while I was still on the landscape committee to the board that they start utilizing social media through our communications chair and our management team. While I was on the landscape committee, I discovered that about 2,000 email addresses in our system are incorrect. So every time our management company sends out an email, it's not necessarily getting to the intended recipient, which is why we have a communications problem. So I think that we should use all means of communication. I'd like to see us put up a group that's sanctioned by the HOA on Nextdoor, on Facebook, and our management team will be able to post any emails that would normally go out. They also post it on those social media sites so that if somebody misses it in their email, they might pick it up in social media. And we can do that and not have a discussion, just post the information. And nobody talks about it as far as the HOA or our management team. But we're still getting the information out there. That's how I feel about it.
We need to do a better job as a community of keeping information up to date. I mean, the businesses that I ran, we had literally thousands of employees, and keeping their email addresses correct or keeping where we can get information to them was a priority within the business. And to be honest with you, I've not seen anybody do it perfectly, but here we certainly could do a much better job.
Yes,
what we're doing.
We do have to obviously get those addresses
absolutely
corrected.
Right, and
that should be done annually, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, there's triggers as well that you can look at, which is change of ownership of homes,
right,
deaths, things of that nature that we can use to update information. But I'm not sure what we're doing here. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure who's actually keeping that ledger current.
Right, I agree. So this goes along with transparency. I think that we should be talking about all the issues on a regular basis. And I talked to Lita about it. I have talked to her about it, and I think she agrees with that. She actually suggested something the other day that I thought was brilliant. She suggested that we have our regular board meeting every month, and then we also have what she called a working meeting every month, which is we pick a particular topic, and then at that working meeting, we only talk about that topic, and we could have back and forth from residents that come to the meeting or get on Zoom. And I thought that was brilliant
I,
because there are some serious topics that we have
yeah.
that requires more attention.
I agree with you. I mean, the techniques that I used to use in the businesses I was responsible for was I would go out into the community. And here we have a marvelous opportunity because we've got over 30 different communities that have regular get-togethers, monthly, quarterly, or whatever, and sitting in with the smaller group of individuals and listening, not telling, listening, finding out what their issues are, what they feel are important. As I would always put it, what's important around here.
Right.
Very, very important to find out what's going on in the communities, where they're satisfied, where you can make improvements, etc. And in some cases, it's simply a matter of directing people to go to a certain place to get something done. Or in many cases, you learn, well, I did not know that was going on over here. And we see that all too often. I see it in the business world and I see it here.
Well, and the other thing is, I noticed when on landscape committee is we're always short of volunteers. And I've heard Larry Anson say that people on SolIVita don't want to volunteer. And I don't think that's true personally. I think that people don't realize how many positions are out there that we need filled. They don't know what the job is. They don't know what the job description is. So how could they volunteer for it? I got on the landscape committee because I played water volleyball with Mike Luddy. And Mike Luddy knew that I had my background. And so he called the landscape chair, who also happened to be my neighbor, and told him to come knock on my door. So, I mean, I had a personal invitation. And many people on these committees, that's how they're getting on these committees. They're personally invited by a board member or somebody close to a board member. So I suggested, because the SLC was so shorthanded, that we go out and actively recruit for volunteers for things.
Absolutely.
The expo that we do every year for the clubs has a huge turnout every year. So if we were to hold an expo for volunteers, I think that people would be really surprised at how many people step up to volunteer. And if we do an expo, you have a table for every committee, a table for the captain's program, anything you need. And we have the job descriptions wrote up, how long you would have to serve, how many hours per month that we would request of you, all those things. And then people could volunteer for the jobs that they're interested in. I think that would work wonderful to bring in volunteers.
I agree. But now let me get back to an issue you brought up here, and that is the overall aesthetics of the community. What do you think, and how do you? Because I mean, it's a common theme that I've been listening to for the past couple of weeks, which I'm not going to say surprising, but residents talk about trees being down, not being replaced, problems with landscaping, and to be fair, a lot of this occurred because we went to Yardnick, but since we've come out of Yardnick, things appear to be getting better. But I mean, the comments themselves are absolutely overwhelming when you sit and listen to them.
And I was on the landscape committee throughout all of that. And it's one of the reasons, well, I resigned from the landscape committee in frustration afterwards. And that's one of the reasons why I ran for the board. I was very upset about that. I owned a company. I did erosion control, but erosion control also encompasses trees, shrubs, grass seed, temporary seeding, things like that. So it is partly landscaping. So that's why I joined the committee. And it was just the whole Yardnick situation was so frustrating because everything happened so fast. It was a blind bid, okay, which meant we were not told who the bidders were. So we could not look up their reputation. There was no way for us to check it. And we didn't like that. And during that process, 2 members resigned because they were very upset about that. They didn't think it was right that we could not get all the information we needed. And obviously, you see the turnout from it. What happened? Because we could not check the background of anybody. The other thing that happened, which I was very unhappy about, was Flora Lawn's bid was thrown out. And I don't think that should have happened. I think that had we not had a blind bid, that wouldn't have happened. And that would have changed the whole process. I think that we have to have a set of guidelines for how we manage our vendors and how we acquire bids. Because for the Blue Stream Spectrum bid process, that was all open. You knew exactly who the companies were. You were able to check their backgrounds. But then when landscape, not too long after, came to do the landscaping, it was all blind. Why do we do it two different ways?
Yeah, well, but
It doesn't make any sense. And that's why people were frustrated. So I think that right now what I think is we are a reactive rather than proactive community. We react when something happens instead of proactively trying to anticipate a problem and avoid it. I always try and be proactive in my businesses. I try and anticipate problems down the road, and I try and have an A, B, and C plan in case this thing happens. We don't have that. We are completely reactive. As far as the irrigation goes, I went to Yardney and said, what's going on? Why are we having so many problems? And they told me that our irrigation systems had been hit at Treviso, had been hit by lightning twice. I had already been on the landscape committee for over a year, and I had no idea that we were having those irrigation problems, which again was part of my frustration because I didn't know these things. So I asked Yardney, I said, if we have to replace a system, what will it cost us? And that's when I found out we weren't even mapped. So there's a lot of issues that most residents are not aware of. And if we had a working meeting to discuss irrigation, people would have that information out there to look up and find out.
well, it's not good when there's information out there that the committee's not aware of.
Right.
But I mean, I look at the committees, and we've got, what, 11 committees here, and according to the documentation, 5 to 6 of the committees haven't had a meeting in, what, 2 years here?
Oh, I don't know about that.
We've got to get, well, and that's a fair comment, because the documentation indicates that they haven't had a meeting with an agenda in a period of time. We've got to get all that back on track.
Yeah. Now, I will say on the landscape committee, we had an agenda for every meeting, and we took minutes for every meeting, and our chairman did a report for every meeting. My biggest problem was we'd be sitting in a meeting, and a homeowner would come to the door and want to come into the meeting to ask a question or state a problem, and they were told, you're not allowed to come in these meetings, you need to leave.
What was
That bothered me.
What was the reason for that? Why was that?
Because well, and that's what I said. I said, why are we having closed meetings? Because to me, our purpose on a committee is to assist the board, to be an arm of the board. So to me, we're supposed to be dealing directly with the residents. If there's a problem with somebody's yard, they should be able to come to us.
I agree. Yeah.
And then we take it to the landscaper, and if we can't get it fixed there, we take it to the board. That's not the way it works.
But is that a common thread amongst all the different committees? They don't.
I don't know because I've only served on landscape.
Wow.
But I was told, I asked 3 different times if we could make our meetings open to residents, especially during the Yardney problem, so we could hear them and listen to them, because people just want to be heard.
Yeah.
And I was told no. That I said, well, are you sure that that's legal? And they said, we talked to the HOA attorneys, and they said, we don't have to let people into our meetings. Well, just because you don't have to doesn't mean you shouldn't.